Long ago, in a quiet valley where the hills rolled gently like waves of green silk, there lay a small village. The villagers were humble folk, farmers, shepherds, and craftsmen, who rose with the sun and slept beneath the stars. Life was simple there, predictable as the changing seasons. But one spring, something occurred that would disturb this pattern, something so curious that people would whisper about it for years to come. In a modest stone cottage at the edge of the village, a child was born to a kindly baker and his wife. They had long hoped for a son, and at last, the wife's cries of labor gave way to the first sharp wails of a newborn. The midwife swaddled the boy in linen, smiled, and was about to place him in his mother's arms when she paused. Her eyes widened. The boy was healthy and strong, but upon his cheek sprouted 2 tiny tufts of hair, like the whiskers of a young cat. At first, the midwife thought it a trick of the lantern light. She rubbed her eyes, leaned closer, and touched the baby's face. No mistake, the whiskers were real. Black and silken, they shone oddly against the pale softness of his infant skin. The midwife stammered, then handed the child to his mother with an uncertain bow of her head. The baker's wife gasped when she saw him. "Oh, my little one," she whispered, half in wonder and half in fear. The father, entering with flour still dusted on his arms, looked upon his son and frowned. "Whiskers?" he muttered. "On a babe?" Word spread quickly through the village. By dawn, curious neighbors gathered at the cottage door, eager for a glimpse. Some laughed and declared it a sign of mischief. Others crossed themselves, muttering of omens. Children whispered that perhaps the boy was part animal, born of some wild magic. No one could quite agree. But all agreed on one thing. The child was unlike any they had ever seen. Despite the gossip, the mother loved her son fiercely. She held him close, humming lullabies and tracing the outline of his strange little whiskers with tender fingers. "You are mine," she would whisper, "and whatever you are meant to be, I will not be ashamed of you." She named him Ricky, after her own grandfather, a man known for his wit and kindness. The father, though bewildered, softened as days passed. "Perhaps," he said gruffly, "these whiskers will prove lucky. Perhaps they mark him for greatness." Yet even he could not silence the uneasy murmurs that followed them wherever they went. As Ricky grew through his first months, his whiskers grew too. They remained small, but sharp and defined, standing out upon his round, innocent face. Strangely, animals seemed to notice him. Cats from the alley slinked near the cottage, purring at the window. Stray dogs wagged their tails and followed him in the streets. Even sparrows fluttered down to perch close when his mother carried him outdoors. The villagers, seeing this, shook their heads. Some claimed he was blessed. Others whispered that he was cursed. On Ricky's first birthday, the baker invited a few neighbors for a modest feast. Bread, honey, and fresh milk were laid upon the table. Yet even then, the whiskers became the subject of talk. An old crone peered into the child's eyes and murmured, "Mark me, these are not ordinary whiskers. This boy will grow to be clever enough to outwit even princes. But cleverness is a double-edged blade. It can bring glory, or ruin." The room fell silent at her words. Some nodded, thinking of tales where strange children rose to greatness. Others frowned, fearful of what cleverness might mean. Ricky's mother simply kissed her son's brow and said firmly, "Then let it be glory." As the years turned, Ricky toddled about the village, always under the watchful gaze of those around him. He was quick to learn words, quicker than other children his age. His laughter was bright and his eyes sparkled with mischief. Yet no matter how sweet his smile, the whiskers upon his cheeks made him stand apart. Some villagers grew fond of him, calling him Little Fox or Kitten Boy. Others avoided him, muttering of omens. But whether admired or feared, Ricky was never ignored. His presence was a reminder that even in a simple village, the extraordinary might be born in the most ordinary of cottages. And so the story of Ricky began, not with riches or splendor, but with the curious gift of whiskers upon his cheeks. They were a mark, a sign, a mystery, whether blessing or curse no one yet knew. But the winds that swept over the valley seemed to whisper that destiny had touched this child, and that his life would not unfold like the lives of other boys. Thus began the tale of Ricky of the Whiskers, a tale that would one day reach beyond the valley, beyond the hills, into the courts of kings and the pages of legends. The years rolled on like clouds across the valley sky, and Ricky grew from a stumbling toddler into a lively boy. His whiskers, once only a curious tuft upon his cheeks, lengthened as he did. By his 7th year, they were unmistakable, black and fine, framing his face in a way no child should. The village had grown accustomed to him, though not without unease. Some accepted him as simply different. Others kept their distance, murmuring when he passed. Children taunted him, "Ricky the cat! Ricky the fox!" Yet none could deny that Ricky had a sharp mind and a silver tongue. He answered mockery with clever retorts, and more often than not, the taunters left red-faced. Still, Ricky longed for a place where he might belong, where his whiskers would not mark him as strange. It was during this restless time that fate sent him a sign, one that would shape the course of his life. It happened on an autumn evening when the village was preparing for the harvest festival. Lanterns of carved gourds lined the streets, and laughter filled the air. Ricky's parents allowed him to wander through the festivities, though they warned him not to stray too far. But curiosity has always been stronger than caution in the young, and Ricky's steps carried him beyond the square, into the quiet shadows of the village outskirts. There, seated on a stone by the old well, was a figure draped in tattered robes. Her hair was white as frost, her back bent with age, and her eyes glittered like embers in the dark. She was known among the villagers as Old Mora, the fortune-teller. Some called her wise, others muttered she was a witch. Ricky had never spoken to her, though he often caught her watching him with an unreadable gaze. This time, she beckoned him closer. "Ricky of the Whiskers," she croaked, her voice carrying strangely in the still night. "Do you know why you were born with such a mark?" Ricky hesitated. "No, ma'am," he said cautiously, "but people laugh at me for it." Her lips curled into something between a smile and a grimace. "Let them laugh. They laugh because they cannot see. These whiskers are no accident. They are the sign of a gift." Ricky blinked. "A gift?" She nodded. "Yes. Those whiskers carry within them the thread of wisdom, sharper than any blade, swifter than any arrow. You are destined to be clever beyond measure, boy. Clever enough to solve riddles that kings cannot. Clever enough to outwit men stronger, richer, and more handsome than you." Ricky's heart leapt at the words, though doubt shadowed his excitement. "But if I am so clever, why do people treat me like a joke?" Old Mora's gaze softened, though her eyes still burned with strange fire. "Because gifts are often hidden in thorns. They see only the strangeness, not the treasure. But mark this, child. One day you will meet a soul who lacks what you can give. To them, your gift will mean salvation. To you, it will mean a choice." "What kind of choice?" Ricky whispered. The fortune-teller leaned close, so close that Ricky could smell the herbs woven into her hair. "A choice between loneliness and love, between being mocked and being honored, between living quietly as you are, or daring to claim a place greater than any you have dreamed." The boy swallowed hard. "And if I choose wrong?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Then cleverness becomes a curse, for wisdom can build, but it can also destroy. Remember this, Ricky. Your whiskers are both blessing and burden. Use them well, or they will turn upon you." Before Ricky could ask more, she pressed something into his palm. A small bronze charm shaped like a fox. "Keep this with you," she said. "It will remind you of the truth. The fox is mocked for its slyness, yet it survives where stronger beasts perish." And with that, she rose and hobbled into the shadows, leaving Ricky clutching the charm, his mind whirling with wonder and fear. That night, when he returned home, his mother noticed the faraway look in his eyes. "What troubles you, my son?" she asked, brushing his whiskers gently. "Nothing," Ricky murmured, though the weight of Old Mora's prophecy lay heavy in his heart. He did not speak of it, not even to his parents, but from that day forward, he carried the fox charm with him always, hidden in his pocket. In time, he would forget the exact sound of her voice, but he would never forget her words. And deep inside he knew, his life would not be like the lives of other boys. Something awaited him beyond the village, something vast and strange. Thus the seed of prophecy was planted, quiet and unseen, but destined to grow into branches that would twist through every part of Ricky's tail. By the time Ricky reached his 12th year, he had grown into a boy of sharp eyes, quick wit, and a tongue far quicker than his fists. His whiskers had thickened, now dark lines along his cheeks, so that no passerby could fail to notice them. To his mother, they were still a mark of uniqueness. To his father, they were perhaps a sign of destiny. But to most of the villagers, they remained a source of endless ridicule. The village children were the cruelest of all. Each morning when Ricky walked to fetch water from the well or to carry bread for his father, they would follow at his heels, calling out jeers. "Look, it's Ricky the cat. Careful, he'll scratch you. No, he's Ricky the fox, sly and sneaky. Better hide your chickens or he'll whisker them away." At first, Ricky tried to ignore them, keeping his head high, but the laughter rang in his ears like the clanging of pots. His chest would burn with shame, and though he told himself their words meant nothing, he could not help but feel the sting. One day, when the teasing grew unbearable, Ricky spun around and faced the crowd of children. His dark eyes flashed, and he said, "Better to be a fox than a donkey. A donkey brays loud but has no wit, while a fox survives with cunning." The children fell silent for a moment, blinking at the sharpness of his reply. Then one of the older boys, taller and broader than Ricky, stepped forward. "Cunning or not, you're still a beast," he sneered. "And beasts belong outside the village." He shoved Ricky, sending him stumbling into the dust. Ricky clenched his fists, his pride aching more than his body. But instead of striking back, he smiled. "If I'm a beast," he said, brushing himself off, "then I am a beast clever enough to live in your heads rent-free. Think on that while you bray at each other." Laughter broke out, not from the bullies, but from a few younger children who admired Ricky's courage. The older boy flushed red and stormed away, muttering under his breath. Ricky had won the moment, but he knew the mockery would not cease. Indeed, it grew worse. The whispers of the adults were subtler but just as painful. When Ricky entered the marketplace, vendors would lower their voices, saying things like, "There goes the boy with the whiskers. Strange, isn't it? Or best not let your daughter speak with him. Who knows what trickery he hides?" Ricky's father defended him when he could, boasting that his son was quick with numbers and sharper at riddles than most grown men. "Mark my words," he declared. "This boy will bring honor to our family one day." But though the villagers nodded politely, few believed him. It was Ricky's mother who gave him the strength to endure. Each evening, when he returned with shoulders heavy and pride wounded, she would sit beside him and stroke his hair. "Remember what I told you," she would whisper. "Your whiskers are not a curse. They are part of you. The world often mocks what it does not understand." Still, Ricky's heart longed for acceptance. He found it not among the villagers, but among the creatures of the fields and forests. Cats curled at his feet when he sat by the bakery door. Dogs wagged their tails and followed him through the meadows. Birds alighted on the fence posts near him, singing as if he were one of their own. With animals, there was no mockery, no cruel laughter, only a quiet companionship that soothed his lonely spirit. One afternoon, Ricky wandered beyond the village to a meadow where the grass grew tall and golden. There he sat with his fox charm in hand, staring at its worn bronze surface. He thought of old Mora's prophecy, her promise that his whiskers were a gift, a sign of wisdom. Yet here in the village, they were nothing but a mark of shame. "Is this wisdom?" he asked aloud to the wind. "To be mocked and cast aside?" A breeze stirred the grass, and for a moment he imagined the fox on the charm winking at him. In that moment, Ricky vowed quietly to himself, one day he would prove them all wrong. He would show them that cleverness was no curse, that his whiskers were not the sign of a beast, but of something greater. But until that day came, Ricky bore the mockery of the town like a cloak he could not shed. He learned to smile at insults, to twist words into shields, to hide pain behind wit. The laughter that once pierced him began to harden him, sharpening his mind like a blade against stone. And so the boy grew, not only in years, but in cunning, in resilience, and in the quiet determination that the world would one day remember him not as Ricky the cat, nor Ricky the fox, but as Ricky of the Whiskers. By his 15th year, Ricky had grown taller, stronger, and keener in mind than most boys his age. Yet the whiskers upon his cheeks had only grown darker, sharper, more defined. They were the first thing anyone noticed about him, and the last thing anyone forgot. For all his wit and quick tongue, for all the riddles he could solve and the clever tricks he could perform, the people of the village could not see past those whiskers. The teasing of childhood had become the whispers of youth. No longer were boys chasing him through the square with catcalls. Instead, young men scoffed behind his back, and young women looked at him with uneasy eyes. "Strange looking," they said softly. "Not a proper husband for any girl." And so Ricky, who longed for friendship and love, found himself a solitary figure. At home, he tried to hide his sorrow. His mother still kissed his brow each night and told him he was meant for something more. His father, though gruff, often clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Never mind the fools, son. One day, they'll be glad to have known you." Yet even their kindness could not soothe the ache in Ricky's heart. One evening, after a long day of whispers and sidelong glances, Ricky slipped away from the village. He wandered beyond the fields, past the shepherds' huts, and into the quiet woods that bordered the valley. There, among the tall trees and rustling leaves, he felt a strange peace. The animals of the forest seemed to welcome him. Foxes darted through the underbrush without fear. Birds fluttered down to perch nearby. And even the deer, shy creatures by nature, did not flee at his approach. In their company, Ricky felt less alone. He would sit by a brook, tossing crumbs of bread to the birds, or lie in the grass as a fox curled at his side. Sometimes he spoke aloud, sharing his thoughts with the creatures. "You do not laugh at me," he told them. "You do not call me beast. To you I am simply Ricky." Yet even as the forest comforted him, it could not erase the longing within. He craved a place where he belonged not as an oddity, but as himself. And so, as the seasons turned, Ricky's restless spirit grew. He began to roam farther, wandering into hills and meadows beyond the valley. The more he walked, the more he dreamed, of cities where no one knew his name, of kingdoms where perhaps his whiskers would be seen not as a curse, but as a sign of something wondrous. One night, as the village slumbered, Ricky stood outside his family's cottage. The moonlight gleamed upon his whiskers like silver threads. In his hand, he held the bronze fox charm given to him by old Mora. He turned it over, feeling its worn edges, and remembered her words. A choice between loneliness and love. A gift that can build or destroy. "I cannot stay here," he whispered. "Not forever. My path lies elsewhere." And so it was decided. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Ricky packed a small bundle, a loaf of bread, a flask of water, and the fox charm. His mother found him at the door, eyes filled with worry. "You're leaving?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "I must," Ricky said softly. "I cannot live forever in the shadows of whispers. There must be a place where I am more than a boy with whiskers. Perhaps beyond these hills I will find it." Tears welled in her eyes, but she smiled bravely. "Then go, my son. Go and do not be afraid. Wherever you wander, remember that you are loved. And remember, your whiskers are not your shame. They are your crown." His father said little, only pressed a loaf of fresh bread into his hands, and nodded, pride and sadness mingling in his gaze. "Be clever, boy," he said simply, "and return to us when you have made the world see you as we do." With that blessing, Ricky stepped out of the village and onto the open road. Behind him lay the valley of his birth, filled with both love and scorn. Before him stretched forests, rivers, and mountains he had never seen. His heart pounded with fear, but also with hope, for though he walked alone, he carried within him the spark of destiny, and the memory of a prophecy that had yet to unfold. Thus, Ricky became the lonely wanderer, leaving behind the place that mocked him, seeking a world where perhaps his whiskers would be more than a burden. He did not know where the road would lead, but he walked with steady steps, guided by the quiet whisper of the fox charm in his pocket, and by the unshakable belief that he was meant for more. Ricky's journey carried him far beyond the hills of his childhood. For many days he wandered alone, with only the bread from his father's oven and the memory of his mother's kiss to keep him strong. The roads wound through forests that grew deeper and darker, through meadows golden with tall grass, and across brooks that whispered secrets as they flowed. At first, loneliness pressed heavy on him. Though he was free of the villagers' laughter, silence now surrounded him like a cloak. He spoke to the trees, to the wind, to the bronze fox charm he carried in his pocket. But none answered, and the boy who had longed for escape found that the world beyond his village was vast, strange, and often frightening. It was on the 7th night of his wandering that Ricky met the one who would change his fate. He had built a small fire in a clearing, its glow casting long shadows among the trees. As he sat eating the last crust of bread from his bundle, he heard a rustle in the underbrush. His heart leapt. Wolves, perhaps, or bandits. He seized a branch from the fire and held it like a weapon. From the shadows, a pair of golden eyes blinked. Then, stepping into the firelight, came a fox. Its coat shimmered russet and silver, sleek as flowing silk. The animal moved with a strange calm, unafraid of the flames or of Ricky's makeshift torch. It stopped a few paces away, sat down neatly, and regarded him with a gaze far too knowing. "You needn't wave that stick at me," the fox said, in a voice as smooth as flowing water. Ricky nearly dropped the torch in shock. His heart hammered against his ribs. Did you just speak?" he stammered. The fox tilted its head, whiskers twitching. "I did. And I've been watching you, Ricky of the Whiskers." The boy gaped, unsure whether to flee or laugh. "How do you know my name?" The fox's eyes gleamed in the firelight. "Names have power. Yours carries weight. Do you think your whiskers are only hair? No, child. They are a mark, a thread of magic woven into you before you drew your first breath. Animals see what people do not. We recognize our own." Ricky swallowed hard, his hand straying to the bronze charm in his pocket. "Old Mora told me once that my whiskers were a gift, though I've only known them to bring scorn." The fox's ears flicked forward. The old woman spoke true. Those whiskers bind you to a rare magic. You carry cleverness in them, enough to lend wisdom to others. But beware. Gifts such as yours are never without price. Ricky frowned. "Wisdom, cleverness? What does that mean?" "It means," the fox said, rising to its feet, "that you may give to others what they lack. You can share your wit, your cunning, your spark of understanding. But when you give, you also bind yourself to the one who receives. Choose wisely, Ricky. Share your gift with the unworthy, and you will suffer for it. Share it with one who values you, and both your fates will be lifted." Ricky's mind reeled. The jeers of the villagers, the prophecy of old Mora, the loneliness that had driven him into the world, all of it swirled together like storm clouds. "So my whiskers, they are not a curse?" The fox's mouth curved in what might almost have been a smile. "No curse. A burden, yes, but also a crown. The villagers could not see it, but others will, and soon, very soon, you will meet someone who needs your gift more than you can imagine." The boy leaned closer, hope flickering in his chest. Who will it be?" But the fox only flicked its tail. "That is for you to discover. Destiny does not speak its secrets all at once. It whispers, little by little." Before Ricky could ask more, the fox turned and padded toward the trees. Its form shimmered in the firelight, and with each step it seemed to fade, until only the golden glow of its eyes remained in the dark. Then even that was gone, and Ricky was alone once more. He sat by the fire, his heart pounding, the bronze charm clenched tightly in his hand. The forest around him felt alive, as though listening to the new weight of his thoughts. For the first time in his life, Ricky felt not cursed, but chosen. And though he still did not know where the road would lead, he knew now that his whiskers were not simply the source of laughter. They were the key to a destiny unfolding before him. Days turned into weeks as Ricky wandered beyond the forests and meadows he had once known. His path wound across ridges and rivers, each step carrying him farther from the village of his birth. The bronze fox charm weighed warmly in his pocket, a reminder of the prophecy and of the strange talking fox who had revealed the truth of his gift. Ricky walked with a new purpose, though he still did not know where destiny would guide him. It was in the bustling market town of Elderspire, nestled beneath the towers of a royal palace. that Ricky first heard whispers of the princess. He had come there hungry and weary, trading his clever tongue for bread and a night's rest. A baker's wife, amused by his quick riddles, fed him in exchange for entertainment. As Ricky sat near the warmth of the oven, she spoke to her neighbor of the king's sorrow. "They say she is the fairest in the land," the woman sighed, kneading dough with her strong hands. "But beauty alone has brought her no happiness. Poor child, so graceful, so kind, yet as witless as a bird in a snare. She cannot solve a riddle, cannot remember a simple story, cannot reason even with her tutors. The king has summoned scholars from every corner of the realm, yet none have succeeded in giving her wit. She weeps daily, ashamed of her folly." Her neighbor clucked her tongue. "A pity. A princess must be more than lovely. She must be wise. Without wit, how can she ever rule? Some say no prince will marry her. Who would want a wife who cannot speak cleverly at court?" Ricky sat very still, the bread in his hand forgotten. A princess without wit, a girl drowning in beauty but starved of understanding. The words of old Mora echoed in his mind. "One day you will meet a soul who lacks what you can give. To them your gift will mean salvation. To you it will mean a choice." Could this be the soul the prophecy had foretold? The next morning, Ricky rose early and made his way to the palace gates. The guards laughed when they saw him, a wanderer in worn boots with whiskers upon his cheeks. "Turn back, boy," one sneered. "This is no place for you. Only scholars, princes, and wise men enter to counsel the princess." But Ricky's wit was sharper than their mockery. He bowed low, his whiskers brushing his face as he smiled. "Then surely you must let me pass. For no prince can be wise without counsel, and no scholar is wise who ignores the unusual. I may look a beast, but beasts have cunning, and cunning is often what beauty most requires." The guards blinked, momentarily confused by the twisting cleverness of his words. Before they could decide whether to laugh or scold, Ricky slipped through the gates along with a group of merchants delivering goods. Inside the palace, grandeur rose all around him, marble columns gleaming white as bone, tapestries rich with gold thread, and servants hurrying like bees in a hive. But none of it captured Ricky's attention as much as the princess herself when at last he glimpsed her. She sat alone in a sunlit chamber, her golden hair falling like a river over her shoulders, her eyes as blue as summer skies. Her beauty was breathtaking, yet there was sorrow in her gaze. She held a scroll in her delicate hands, frowning as though the very letters upon it were enemies. A tutor beside her sighed in despair. "No, your highness, the riddle is simple. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening?" The princess shook her head. "I cannot say. The words twist and tangle. I do not understand." Her voice trembled, and tears glistened in her eyes. "I am a burden to my father. What good is beauty if I am a fool?" Ricky's heart tightened. Here, before him, was no proud royal, no distant untouchable. She was simply a girl caught in chains of her own helplessness. And though he had been mocked all his life for the whiskers upon his cheeks, he saw in her a sorrow even deeper than his own. That night, Ricky stood outside the palace walls, staring up at the high windows where the princess's chamber glowed with candlelight. The fox's words whispered in his memory. "You may give to others what they lack, but choose wisely, Ricky." The choice was forming before him. He could share his gift with her, lend her his wit, give her the cleverness she so desperately lacked. Yet what would it cost him? If he gave away too much, would he be left hollow, mocked not only for his whiskers, but for his folly in wasting his gift? And yet, as the moon rose, Ricky knew that destiny was no longer waiting on the road ahead. It had found him here, in the sorrowful eyes of a princess who could not laugh at a riddle. The following day, Ricky rose before the sun and made his way once more to the palace gates. He was determined now, for the sorrow in the princess's eyes haunted him like a shadow. Her beauty had dazzled him, yes, but it was her helplessness, her longing to be more than a jewel on a throne, that stirred his heart. This time, when the guards laughed at him, he did not argue. He simply said, "Take me to your king. I can help the princess." There was such calm certainty in his voice that, though the guards sneered, they obeyed. Perhaps it was his whiskers that unsettled them, or the glint of strange confidence in his eyes. Inside the great hall, King Aldrin sat upon a throne of carved oak, his face lined with both wisdom and weariness. Courtiers and scholars stood nearby, muttering among themselves. The princess knelt at her father's side, her head bowed, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. She was lovely as the dawn, but her expression was full of shame. Ricky strode forward and bowed. "Your Majesty, I am Ricky of the Whiskers, a wanderer with no wealth, no noble name, but a gift unlike any other." The hall filled with laughter. "A vagabond," one scholar scoffed. "What gift can he offer that we, the finest minds of the kingdom, cannot?" Ricky's whiskers twitched as he smiled faintly. "You offer knowledge, and she cannot grasp it. I offer cleverness itself, for it is not knowledge the princess lacks, but the key to unlock it." The king raised his hand for silence, his eyes narrowing. "And how, boy, do you claim to give what the gods themselves have withheld?" Ricky placed a hand on his chest. "It is in me, sire. My whiskers are the mark of it. I can share my wit with others, if I choose. Lend her a spark of what I carry, and she will shine brighter than you ever dreamed." The court erupted again, some laughing, others whispering of witchcraft. The princess looked up, her tearful eyes wide with both hope and doubt. "Is it true?" she asked softly. "Could you truly make me clever?" Ricky met her gaze. "Yes, but such a gift cannot be given lightly. It binds the giver and the receiver forever. If I share my wit with you, princess, I will ask something in return." The hall grew hushed. The king leaned forward, suspicion in his voice. "And what would you demand, wanderer?" Ricky's heart pounded, but he did not falter. "Her hand in marriage," gasps filled the chamber. The scholars bristled in outrage. The courtiers whispered furiously, and the king's brow darkened with thunder. "Marriage? A vagabond dares to bargain for my daughter's hand?" But Ricky stood firm. "I ask not as a thief, but as one offering a fair trade. You seek a cure for her sorrow. I alone can give it. If you refuse, she will remain as she is. If you accept, she will have wit to match her beauty, and I will have a bride who knows my worth." The princess's cheeks flushed crimson. At first she looked stricken, caught between her father's authority and the boldness of this strange youth. Yet as she studied Ricky, she saw something in him that none of the handsome princes nor learned scholars had ever shown her. Honesty. He did not pity her nor treat her as a prize to be won. He spoke to her as if she had power to choose. "Father," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What if he speaks truth? Would it not be worth the risk?" The king's hands tightened on the arms of his throne. He was a man bound by both love for his daughter and fear of making her a fool twice over. Yet desperation often drives kings as much as it drives beggars. At last he said, "Very well. If you can prove your claim, boy, and give my daughter wit, then you shall have her hand. But if you lie, if this is trickery, you will be cast into the dungeons, never to see daylight again." Ricky bowed low, his whiskers brushing his cheeks. "Agreed." The princess's eyes lingered on him as he straightened. There was both fear and wonder in her gaze. She did not know what it meant to have cleverness, nor what it meant to share such a bond. But in Ricky's boldness she saw a strange light, a chance at freedom from her sorrow. And so the bargain was struck, the gift of wit for the promise of love. It was a wager no scholar could have made, no prince would have dared, and no fool would have dreamed. Yet Ricky of the Whiskers, mocked in his village and scorned for his face, stood at the heart of a royal court, ready to change a princess's fate, and his own. The bargain had been made, though doubt still lingered in the high-arched hall of King Aldrin's court. Courtiers whispered behind jeweled hands, scholars frowned with disdain, and the guards shifted uneasily, as if expecting the whiskered vagabond to vanish in a puff of smoke. Only Ricky himself stood calm, though his heart beat like a drum within his chest. The princess sat upon a cushioned seat near her father's throne, her hands folded in her lap. Her eyes, wide and uncertain, rested upon Ricky. She was caught between hope and fear, between the weight of her father's expectations and her own yearning to be more than the foolish beauty she had always been called. Ricky stepped forward, bowing deeply. "Princess," he said gently, "may I touch your hand?" The king bristled, but after a long moment he gave a curt nod. "Do it quickly, boy. Let us see if your boast holds truth." Ricky approached the princess, his whiskers brushing against his cheeks as though stirred by invisible wind. He knelt before her, lowering his voice so that only she might hear. "Do not be afraid. I will not take from you what you do not wish to give, but if you allow me, I will share my gift with you." The princess hesitated, then slowly extended her hand. Ricky took it gently in his own, closing his eyes. For a moment, the court fell utterly silent. It was then that Ricky felt it, the faint shimmer of his gift, like a current running from his whiskers into his chest, down his arm, and into the hand he held. The air seemed to hum softly, though perhaps it was only imagination. The princess gasped as a warmth spread through her, a sudden clarity awakening in her mind, as if shutters had been flung open in a darkened chamber. When Ricky opened his eyes, hers were alight with wonder. "What? What have you done?" she whispered. "Nothing but unlock what was waiting," Ricky replied. "Now let us see." He released her hand and turned to the gathered scholars. "You there," he said, pointing to the eldest of them. "Give her a riddle." The same one she could not answer before. The scholar snorted. "This is nonsense." "But very well. Princess, tell me, what creature walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening?" Once such words had been tangled knots in her mind, but now they unfolded like a story she had always known. Her lips curved into a small smile, the first true smile the court had ever seen upon her. "It is man," she said clearly. "As a child he crawls on 4, as an adult he walks on 2, and in old age he takes a staff, making 3. A gasp rippled through the hall. The scholar nearly dropped his scroll. Another stepped forward, eager to prove her failure. "Princess, answer this. I am always hungry. I must always be fed. The finger I lick will soon turn red. What am I?" She lifted her chin, her eyes bright with newfound confidence. "Fire," she answered without hesitation. The courtiers murmured in astonishment. Even the king leaned forward, disbelief softening into awe. "More," cried another scholar as if testing a miracle. "What has roots that no one sees, is taller than trees, up it goes, and yet never grows?" The princess laughed, the sound like bells ringing. "A mountain!" Laughter of joy, not ridicule, filled the hall for the first time in her presence. The courtiers clapped, the scholars exchanged baffled glances, and the king himself rose to his feet. His stern expression wavered as tears gathered in his eyes. "My daughter," he whispered, stepping toward her. You have spoken with wit. You have solved riddles no tutor could teach you. By the stars above, it is true." The princess turned to Ricky, her gaze radiant. "It is as though a veil has lifted from my mind. I feel awake, alive, unbound. You have given me a gift I did not know could exist." Ricky bowed, though his own heart trembled. For in giving her his wit, he had felt a part of himself flow outward. It was not loss, not yet, but he sensed the bond between them had been sealed, invisible and unbreakable. The king faced Ricky, his voice ringing with both pride and solemnity. "You have kept your word. My daughter's wit shines as brightly as her beauty, and so I will keep mine. She shall be your bride." Gasps filled the hall again, though this time they were not mocking. Some whispered in scandal, others in awe, but the princess herself silenced them with a single, confident glance. She rose to her feet, her voice steady and sure for the first time in her life. "I choose it gladly, father, for this man has not only given me wit, but treated me as though I were more than a jewel. He saw me not as a prize, but as a soul in need. That is worth more than crowns." The court stood stunned. Ricky, once mocked as an odd vagabond, now stood beside the princess, his whiskers gleaming in the golden light of the hall. What had once been the source of his shame had become the sign of his triumph. And though the road ahead would bring trials yet, on this day, Ricky of the Whiskers had transformed not only a princess, but his own fate. The news of the princess's transformation spread like wildfire through the kingdom. Where once people whispered of her beauty and her folly, now they spoke with astonishment of her wit. From taverns to marketplaces, from shepherds' huts to noble halls, all told the tale of the whiskered vagabond who had given the princess her cleverness. Some praised it as a miracle. Others muttered that it must be sorcery. And in the gilded castle of Prince Dorian, handsome, proud, and as arrogant as a rooster in the dawn, the tale stirred a storm of anger. "This is an outrage," Dorian thundered, pacing before his gilded mirror. "A beggar with whiskers dares to claim what is mine by right? I, who am of noble blood, who have lands and armies, should wed the fairest princess in the land. Not some stray fox cub who skulks in shadows." His advisors bowed low, though their eyes glittered with fear at his temper. "But Highness, the princess is clever now. The king himself declared her promise to the whiskered one unbreakable." Dorian sneered, his smile sharp as a blade. "Clever or not, she cannot resist the splendor of a true prince. I will go to Elderspire, and before the court I will humiliate this Ricky of the Whiskers. We shall see if he dares to stand beside me when his wits are tested against mine." And so, with banners flying and trumpets blaring, Prince Dorian rode to the palace of King Aldrin. He swept into the great hall in silks embroidered with gold, a jeweled sword at his hip, his chin high with vanity. Courtiers murmured at his magnificence, for he was indeed handsome, tall, and radiant in his pride. The king welcomed him warily, knowing well Dorian's arrogance. The princess, now more confident with her newfound wit, sat at her father's side, her eyes calm as she studied the prince. Ricky stood not far from her, plain in his travel-worn clothes, his whiskers catching the light. Dorian bowed with a flourish. "Your Majesty, I come to save your daughter from folly. Surely you cannot let her wed a vagabond when a prince stands before you. Let her choose me, and I will bring her honor, wealth, and glory." The princess lifted her chin, her voice steady. "I have already chosen Prince Dorian. I do not seek wealth or glory, but a man who saw worth in me when no one else did." Murmurs spread through the hall. Dorian's handsome face flushed with anger. "You would spurn me for him. Very well. Let us put this whiskered pretender to the test. If he claims to have wit, let us see it in a contest of riddles judged by the court. If I win, the princess shall wed me instead." The king frowned, torn between duty and pride. But the courtiers urged him, eager for spectacle, and at last he agreed. "So be it. A contest of wit shall decide. If Ricky triumphs, he keeps his claim. If not, Prince Dorian shall wed my daughter." The hall was cleared, and the two men stood before the throne. The courtiers leaned close. The scholars sharpened their quills to record the contest, and the princess clasped her hands, her heart pounding though her eyes never left Ricky. Dorian sneered as he spoke the first riddle. "I am not alive, yet I grow. I have no mouth, yet I roar. I am born in the hearth, yet I devour the forest. What am I?" Ricky's whiskers twitched as he smiled. "Fire," the court applauded. The princess's eyes gleamed with pride. Ricky answered with a riddle of his own. "I speak without a tongue. I hear without ears. I am born of emptiness, yet fill the air. What am I?" Dorian hesitated, his brow furrowed. He had expected a fool, not this sharp-tongued wanderer. After a pause, he growled, "An echo." "Correct," Ricky said, nodding. So the contest went back and forth. Dorian with his polished confidence, Ricky with his quiet cunning. The crowd leaned forward with every answer, gasping when Dorian faltered, cheering when Ricky triumphed. At last, Ricky spoke the final riddle, one he had learned from the fox itself. "I am the traveler who never tires, the companion who never speaks, the witness to every step you take. What am I?" Dorian frowned, then scowled, his arrogance cracking. He muttered guesses, the wind, the road, the horse, but each fell flat. His pride would not let him admit defeat. The princess rose to her feet, her voice ringing clear across the hall. "The answer is a shadow." The court erupted with applause. Ricky bowed to her, his eyes warm with admiration. The bond between them glowed brighter than ever. Dorian's face burned red, his hands trembling with fury. "Trickery!" he shouted. "This is sorcery, not wit." But the king silenced him with a raised hand. "Enough. Ricky of the Whiskers has won. The bargain stands. My daughter shall be his bride," and so, humiliated before all, Prince Dorian stormed from the hall, his pride wounded deeper than any sword could cut. Yet Ricky, the boy once mocked and cast aside, stood beside the princess triumphant. What began as a wager of riddles had ended as proof, his wit, his courage, and his strange gift had overcome the pride of princes. The great hall of Elder Spire still echoed with the sounds of applause and wonder, long after Prince Dorian's jeweled boots had thundered out in defeat. The courtiers, once so quick to laugh at Ricky's whiskers, now whispered his name with awe. The scholars who had mocked him bent their heads in respect, their quills scratching furiously to record the tale for generations to come. But Ricky himself stood quietly at the princess's side, his heart thudding in his chest. Victory was his, yet he felt no boastful pride. Instead, he felt a deep calm, as though the wandering of his youth, the scorn, the loneliness, the prophecy of the old woman, even the fox's riddle-filled counsel, had all led him to this moment. The king rose from his throne, his voice booming across the chamber. "Ricky of the Whiskers, you have proven yourself not by strength of arms, nor by wealth or title, but by the sharpness of your wit and the truth of your heart. You have given my daughter the gift of cleverness, and in so doing, you have given this kingdom hope. As I have promised, you shall be her husband, and together you shall rule beside me until the day comes when the crown is yours." A cheer thundered through the hall, shaking the vaulted ceiling. The princess turned to Ricky, her eyes alight not only with wit but with joy. No longer did she shrink with shame. No longer did she lower her head to hide her sorrow. She was radiant, her beauty and cleverness shining as one. "I choose this gladly," she declared, her voice ringing like silver bells. "For he gave me not only wit but respect. Where others mocked or pitied me, he treated me as an equal, a soul worth saving. In his whiskers I see not foolishness, but a crown of wisdom." The courtiers gasped at her boldness, for never before had she spoken so surely. Ricky bowed deeply, his whiskers brushing his face as he whispered, "And I choose you, princess, not for your crown, nor for your beauty, but because your heart is true. Together, we will weave a tale greater than either of us alone." That very day, the palace rang with celebration. Banners of gold and crimson fluttered in the breeze. Trumpets sounded across the city, and the people poured into the streets to rejoice. Bakers handed out sweet cakes, children sang rhymes about riddles, and old women smiled knowingly, whispering that the prophecy had come to pass. The wedding feast lasted 3 days and 3 nights. Princes from distant lands, humbled by Ricky's victory, raised their cups in reluctant respect. The scholars, still muttering about mysteries they could not explain, conceded that cleverness was a gift not found in books, but in hearts. And in the midst of it all, the princess laughed freely for the first time in her life, her wit shining brighter than the jewels upon her crown. As husband and wife, Ricky and the princess sat together at the high table. Between them burned a bond invisible to others but unbreakable to themselves. The bond of his gift, shared and sealed by choice. Ricky knew the fox's words had come true. To give his wit was to bind his fate to hers. But far from a burden, it felt like a blessing. On the morning after the feasting ended, Ricky walked alone into the palace gardens. There, beneath the shade of an ancient oak, he caught a glimpse of russet fur and golden eyes watching him from the shadows. The fox stepped forward, silent as the wind. "You have chosen well, Ricky of the Whiskers," the creature said, its voice a gentle echo in the dawn. "You gave your gift not for gain, but for love, and so it shall not diminish you, but strengthen you. Your whiskers, once mocked, will forever be your mark of wisdom. Guard them, for they are a sign that you carry not only cleverness, but the courage to share it." Ricky bowed low, gratitude swelling in his heart. "Thank you, friend. Without your counsel, I might have wandered forever." The fox's eyes gleamed, and with a flick of its tail, it vanished once more into the woods, leaving only the rustle of leaves behind. From that day forward, Ricky was no longer the lonely boy mocked in his village. He was Ricky of the Whiskers, the wise prince whose cleverness saved a kingdom, whose gift turned sorrow into laughter, and whose love transformed not only a princess, but himself. And though troubles would come, as they always do in kingdoms great and small, Ricky and the princess faced them together, wit and beauty united, wisdom and kindness entwined. For in the end, it was not the whiskers alone that made Ricky great, but the heart behind them. And so the tale was told for generations, passed from fireside to cradle, from scholar to storyteller. The tale of Ricky of the Whiskers, who turned mockery into magic and sorrow into triumph.